We're going to go back. And the sources of the material that I'm sharing with you, first of all, there's a sefer called Shemer Amunim from Rabbi Yosef Irgaz. He lived a little bit before the Baal Shem Tov. The Shemer Amunim. It's called, not the new Shemer, they call the Shemer Amunim Akadman. A sefer that's 300 years old is not exactly Kadma, but they haste this. The Shemer Amunim has an unbelievable Hagdama that was written in our times by Arizal the Kirid, who gives you a brief history of Kabbala. And it's really, really wonderful. And if anybody really wants it, then you'll bother me enough, I'll make you a copy of it. It's 10, 15, 20 pages, and he goes through the whole history of Kabbala linearly, in an orderly fashion. And it's very nice. That's the first part of what I'm going to share with you is from there. And the second part of what I'm going to share with you is mostly from the Zechreres, the Frierdiker Rebbe's memoirs. Now, of course, you must understand that Kabbala is Torah. Soid, Nisted is a part of Torah. In other words, it's Halacha and Nigla. Moshe Rabbeinu came down from Har Sinai, and it says in the Rambam, as we all know, Zu Pirusha, he brought down the Pirush of Torah. Included in the Pirush of Torah is also the Seid, Kabbala. However, Moshe Rabbeinu was taught Seid, Nisted, in such a way that it was not made for the Kol Anshei Ador, it wasn't everybody. It was for the people who had a shaykhs to Seid. In other words, in the Tkuf of the Neviim, obviously Neviim were involved in Seid, or what the Rambam would call Til B'Pardes, strolling around in the garden of secrets of the Torah. And those people who had a shaykhs to Seid learned Seid. Those people who didn't have a shaykhs to Seid did not learn Seid. Like it's described in the Mishnah Masechet Chagiga, I'm sure you know that there's Ma'aseh Bereishis and there's Ma'aseh Merkava. Ma'aseh Bereishis is a lower madrege, Ma'aseh Merkava is a higher madrege. And there are very strict rules how you reveal these secrets of Ma'aseh Merkava and Ma'aseh Bereishis. Now, by Yidden there always was mysticism. By Yidden there was always Seid. There was always what we would call in our culture Kabbala. But it was, as a rule, very secretive, very quiet. And this lasted, of course, the whole Tkuf of Bayis Rishon. Bayis Rishon was a Tkuf of Neviim. To me, it's very simple. A Tkuf of Neviim means a Tkuf of Kabbala. That means to say any person who was dedicated, who cared to be involved in a more spiritual life, and of course, it's at the expense of a more material life, dedicated himself to Ruchnius, to Ruach HaKodesh, to Nevuah, and a significant part of that was the study of Kabbala. Then, of course, without going into too much detail, the Anshei Kneses Hagedola came along, and they changed the center of Torah away from the Nevuah and towards Halacha. It's not Chas v'Shalom that in Bayis Rishon there was no Nevuah and no Halacha. It's not Chas v'Shalom that in Bayis Sheni there was no Ruach HaKodesh, no Nevuah. But the center of Yidden in Bayis Rishon was Neviim. And what the Anshei Kneses Hagedola changed is the future of the Jewish nation, of the Yidden are surviving the next few thousand years. It's Torah Sheba'al Peh, it's Halacha, it's Gemara, it's Pilpul. And Nevuah, Ruach HaKodesh, the spiritual part of Yiddishkeit, became secondary, went into, so to speak, in the closet, became secretive. And if you really wanted to speak about Tzaddik and Baitus and give them the benefit of the doubt, Tzaddik and Baitus were Apakursim, that's what they wanted. They thought that they could continue the tradition that existed in this man Bayis Rishon, which was a very, very spiritual type of Yiddishkeit, and it was no longer possible. Ruach HaKodesh was gone, the Nevuah was Nistalik, as the Gemara says, the Lashon. And as a consequence, the whole dimension of spiritual Yiddishkeit, Ruchnisdik Yiddishkeit, which, like I said to you before, to us really means Kabbala, became less important. It didn't disappear. It never disappeared. There were always Yidden involved in Seid. And during the Tkuf of the Zugais and the Tkuf of the Tanoim, there were people involved in Kabbala. Not a lot, but there were a few. Of course, the big change was in the time of Rab Shimon Bar Yochai. Rab Shimon Bar Yochai's Rebbe was Rabbi Akiva. And it's brought in Sfarim that there are deists that hold that Rabbi Akiva wrote Sefer Yetzirah. Which means, if Rabbi Akiva wrote Sefer Yetzirah, it means Rabbi Akiva was a very, very big expert on Soid. The Pardes brings 2 days. One day he brings it Rabbi Akiva wrote Sefer Yetzirah, another day he brings it Rav Meir wrote Sefer Yetzirah. Now if you look in the Sefer Yetzirah, you have Psukim from Chumash. If Rav Meir wrote Sefer Yetzirah and the Sefer Torah had not yet been written, you have a practical problem, you know. So perhaps the Gedanke is Rav Meir, the ideas of Sefer Yetzirah Rav Meir, and perhaps Rabbi Akiva wrote it down. But Rabbi Akiva had 5 Talmidim. One of his 5 Talmidim was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was a person who not only knew Soid, but was Megalas Soid. During the time of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Kabbala, so to speak, came out of the closet. It was the first generation, the first real generation. After Churban by Yesheni, Rabbi Akiva was Bizman HaChurban. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was after the Churban. And for whatever reason, during that generation, Kabbala became very widely studied. The Rebbe mentioned in Fabrengens that these Yenuka v'Yenuksa, little boys and little girls, who said Seides that are written in Zohar. In other words, during the generation of RaShBi, Kabbala was very, very widely studied. And again, when you say Kabbala, you really mean the spiritual side, the Ruchniisdike side of Yiddishkeit, which is very connected. Although I'm skipping a lot of steps and I'm not giving you the whole argument, it's very connected to the idea of Ruach HaKodesh, even to the idea of Nevuah. These things are very connected. The idea of not just doing Yiddishkeit, but feeling Yiddishkeit, feeling the godliness of Yiddishkeit, is what Seid is about. And during the time of RaShBi, this was very, very widely spread. Before Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai passed away, he said to his Talmud, Rab Abba, that he should write down the Sefer Azayah. And he also told him that this Sefer Azayah is destined for Sefer Maya, for the end of time. In other words, that now it's not to be learned, it's to be learned far into the future. And of course, the famous quote that we knew from the Zayah, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, B'hai chibura dilach, the ihu Sefer Azayah yifkun b'nei Yisrael mi begalusa barachim, which means to say that with this Sefer Azayah, at the end of time, Yidden are going to learn it, and they're going to go out of Golos berachim. And berachim means with ahava, with love. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai passed away. His description of his histalkus is very, very dramatic. It's in the Idra, in Pashas Hazinu, in the Zuta. And the Kabbalah that had been so open during his lifetime became more secret again. In the Shar HaGilgulim, the Arizal, talk about even Tanoim and Ameroim, and say based on their names, this one had a shaykhis to Kabbalah, this one did not have a shaykhis to Kabbalah. It's implicit. It seems that even amongst the Tanoim, not all the Tanoim knew Seid. Some were more involved in Seid, others were less involved in Seid, and so forth. I mean, the Gemara says about Rabbi Yechon and Ben Zakkai, Rabbi Yechon Ben Zakkai did not miss anything. Dover Gadol v'lei Dover Cotton. What's Dover Cotton? Avoyes Abai v'Rover. What's the small things that we was Lumdus, Nigla? What's Dover Gadol? Ma'aseh Bereishis and Ma'aseh Makaber. In other words, the Gemara says about Rabbi Yechon Ben Zakkai that he was a Moedim Makubal. Rabbi Yechon Ben Zakkai was the Rebbe of Rabbi Akiva's Rebbes. In other words, he was the Rebbe of the Rebbe of the Rebbe of RaShBi. But it's implicit. In some of even it says that Rabbi Akiva's 5 Talmidim, Rabbi Shimon had a shaykhis to Seid, and the other 4, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yasi, and Rabbi Lazar, didn't have a shaykhis to Seid. And the Zohar disappeared. How the Zohar disappeared, and why the Zohar disappeared, either it was deliberately put away, or over time people stopped learning that the Zohar disappeared. But Kabbala didn't. Kabbala always existed by Yidden. But the Kabbalah that Yidden had was very, very limited, very, very scant. There was only the Sefer Yetzirah. I mean, Sfarim, you had the Sefer Yetzirah, you had Oises Rabbi Akiva, which is another Sefer Kabbalah, very, very little. But you had Bailei Seid, you had people who didn't need too much material to appreciate the Seidus HaTorah. The Chaim Vital, in the Shar HaGdomas to the Sefer Eitz Chaim, lists famous personalities who Mekubalim. He says Rabbi Hai Gaon was a big Mekubal. Rabbi Hai Gaon was before Rashi. Rabbi Hai Gaon passed away the year Rashi was born. And he brings others. He brings the Ramban, he brings Reb Ezer, Reb Bozil, he brings the Ravid, Rabbi Tzchak Nohar. These are all people who lived, at least according to most opinions, before the Zohar was ever discovered again, and they were very, very big Mekubalim. They wrote even Svarim on Kabbala and so forth. So Kabbala disappeared, sort of, from the Am. There were people, basically, very few who were Zohar to have Seid. And even amongst Gedolei Yisrael, even amongst people like the Rambam, not all of them had the schus to have a Shaykhas to Chachmas HaSeid, to Chachmas HaKabbala. Those who did, those who didn't, did not. Now, what happened? This is a sort of a parenthesis, but it's not that much of a parenthesis. What was going on in the world at that time? What was going on in the world at that time was that there was a pervasion, there was a powerful tenuah, movement of philosophy. Hakira. Philosophy is not Torah. Let's make this very clear. Kabbalah is. Philosophy is not Torah. Philosophy is Greek. Philosophy is a goyish chochmah. It's Greek. But the Greek philosophers lived in the end of Bayis Rishon, the beginning of Bayis Sheni, right? The Chachmei Atuna, you're talking a very long time ago. But over the years, philosophy became more and more popular. In the Middle Ages, about 1,000 years ago, philosophy was incredibly popular. Any person who was a trickle man, a trickle chacham, was interested in philosophia. They studied also medicine, they studied also mathematics, they studied also astronomy, but philosophy was very, very important. And philosophy is logic, it's reason, which is very, very, very difficult to pin down. And how do you know something is true or false? You can make almost any argument, you can say almost any svara. You say like this, I say forget it. And of course, in order for philosophy to be true, you have to have several criteria. The first, of course, is the most obvious, is vikuach. How do philosophers prove their points are correct? By debating, arguing. And philosophers were masters at debate, vikuach. But there's something much more edel. And that is that if you want to be a philosopher, you have to really, really want emes. To be an emes, a philosopher, you have to really, really want the truth. Which is why, in philosophy, the integrity of the philosopher is so unbelievably important. If you want in order for a person to want the truth, they have to be a truthful person. And to be a truthful person, you can't just be smart. You have to push it, be edel. In other words, to be an expert at philosophy is very different than being expert at science. To be an expert at science, you person need a good head and a good education. You could be a oisvarf. In your personal life, you could be who cares what, because it's a science that's based entirely on proof and on empirical evidence and on physical things. Chochmas philosophia has so much to do with the integrity of the chocham. And when a person lacks integrity in his own life, it doesn't only discredit him as a person, it discredits him as a chocham. But philosophy was very popular. And of course, the popularity of philosophy affected Yidden. Because for much of our history, Yidden learned all Chochmah. Yidden were the people of the book. Yidden learned any knowledge. There was no separate, the idea of not learning Chochmah Chitonius and that it's Klip and all these things, this is recent. The RaShBi made these charamis. All Yidden learned out. Smart Jews read everything. And philosophy was very compelling, was very interesting. It asked very, very good questions. And it sometimes didn't give the right answers. And Yidden haben genommen learning these philosophies, and it affected their emunah in a very negative way, in a very adverse, in a very, very not positive way. So the Gedolei Yisrael responded. And you understand how responses go, talking about Jews. One response was to outlaw philosophy. And the other response was to create a philosophy which would explain and argue and corroborate Shittas HaTorah. Which people outlawed philosophy? Those people who were not dealing with it. Yidden in Ashkenaz, in Europe. The Goyim were very primitive, the Goyim were very low. And since the Goyim were very low, and the Goyim were not studying philosophy, the Yidden didn't have to deal with philosophy. As a consequence, they could say, we're tarnished. But the Yidden who lived in those lands where philosophy was prevalent, like in Spain, like in Egypt, like in Asia Minor and so forth, they needed to react. So Yidden like Rab Sadia Gaon, and like the Rambam wrote philosophy and so forth. And of course, what came from those philosophies? What came from those philosophies is Achtos and Pshitos, that Chas v'sholom to say Hashem has hands and feet and all of these things that when you read the Torah b'Pashtos, you get impressions that may perhaps be unreasonable. And they explained, they gave all kinds of explanations to be moitzi dvarim mipashtuson, to take things out of their little literal pshat, and to help people understand that Torah's surah, the way Torah is written, and the Eibishter is made to sound like a person, is not chas v'sholom. The Torah believes that the Eibishter is a person, and so forth and so on. And philosophy of Torah became quite popular in some parts of the world, and right into the middle of this fell the discovered Zohar. How you found the Zohar? Now, when did the Zohar reappear? So the Shemer Amunim write that the Zohar reappeared in Tkufas HaGoinim, in other words, 1,000 years ago. You should know that there's a lot of Rishonim who quote, by Ben Abachaya, for example, quotes something called Medesh Rab Shimon. Medesh Rab Shimon and Medesh RaShBi. What's interesting is they quote it in Hebrew. Ben Abachaya has many quotes from Medesh Rab Shimon. When I say many, I don't mean 500, I mean 15, 20, basically. Medesh Rab Shimon. And Medesh Rab Shimon, every time Rabbeinu Bechaya quotes Medesh Rab Shimon, it's in our Zohar. And it seems quite obvious, no one's going to say it to you absolutely for sure, but it seems quite obvious that they call the Zohar Medesh Rab Shimon. It's the same thing that we have, although they were quoting in Hebrew, in other words, they're probably translating from the Aramaic, but you have in Kamar Rishonim something called Medesh Rab Shimon. The Chidah tells the story of how the Zohar was rediscovered. And in this Sefer that I mentioned to you before, in the Hakdama to the Shemer Amunim, the Moitzi La'ayah, the one who brings this, gives a date to it, if I'm not wrong. And the date that he gives is Hey Allah from Nun, 5050. 5050 is 1290. Okay, now, people of course love Ramazim. People love to say, this is how it always is. On one part of the world, you didn't have tzaras, another part of the world, something good occurs, right? 1290 is the year the Jews were expelled from England. The first country to throw out its Jews, and the last country to let them back in, were the British. And it's the same year, again, according to one source that I saw, that Zohar was discovered, 1290, 5050, which means 722 years ago. Now, how was the Zohar found? Of course, it's from RaShBi. Huh? The story that Chidah brings. There was a king in Asia Minor, that means in Bavel, who went treasure hunting. I mean, how do you go treasure hunting in those days? They had some kind of primitive systems of sonar. They used to find water under the ground, and he found the treasure. And in the treasure was scrolls, ancient scrolls, very, very old Megillas. And he called his Chachamim. The Chachamim could not interpret it. So they said, it looks like it belongs to the Yehudim. They called the Jewish Chachamim. And the Chachamim came and they looked at it and they said, this may be the ancient Sfarim of Seides HaTorah, of secrets of Torah. We are not qualified to read it. Send it to Spain. Because in Spain you had Mekubalim, and perhaps these Mekubalim will be able to determine what this is and what it's from and how to deal with it and so forth and so on. So it was sent to Spain to a yid by the name of Rabbi Yehuda de Leon. Rabbi Yehuda de Leon was a big Mekubal. He was a Mekubal from before. Rabbi Yehuda de Leon has his own Sfarim in Kabbala. And he spent a good portion of his life, 25 years, copying this ancient manuscript. Copying it, rewriting from a very, very old Megillah, from a very, very old cloth, from a very, very old parchment, the Sefer HaZohar. Obviously word for word. Rabbi Yehuda de Leon, in addition to copying the Sefer HaZohar, was Masada the Sefer HaZohar. In other words, the Zohar as we have it goes according to Pashas. Bereshis, Shmeis, Vayikra, Midbar, Dvarim. If you look at the Zohar, you'll see right away that the bulk of the Zohar is the Bereshis and Shmeis. Vayikra, Midbar, Dvarim, especially Dvarim, is very, very bekitzer. And he was Masada where to put B'tinyonim and Zohar. What is without question clear is that the Zohar that we have is only a portion of the original Zohar. The original Zohar, we don't know how big it is. In the printed Zohar, you have very often the word chosser, push missing shtiklach, or words, because a document that laid in the ground for 1,000 years, as well as it was preserved, in reality there's going to be deficiencies. When he was Mesada the Zayar, he divided the Zayar into parts based on the script, based on the Ksav. First of all, you have the Zayar proper. The Behuda Dilion. Dilion, Dalad Yud, Lamed Yud, Aleph Vav Nun. There's the Sefer HaZayar itself, which he organized according to Parshas. And by the way, a Meshach Zman later, I don't know how much later, they found more Ksavim, and they copied and distributed those separately under a title called Zayar Chodesh. Zayar Chodesh really means the same material of the Zayar, but that it was found and copied later than the Zayar itself, and therefore it came out separately. It's called Zayar Chodesh. And in addition to Zayar, there's other sections. For example, there's something called Medrash HaNe'elam. It's a section in Zayar. There's a section in Zayar that's called Raya Mehemne. Raya Mehemne is the part of Zayar that was said by Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu used to come to the yeshiva of RaShBi and teach Torah. What's interesting about the Raya Mehemne is that most of it is actually a Sefer HaMitzvahs. The Sefer HaMitzvahs of Kabbala, the Minyan HaMitzvahs of Kabbala, and by no means does he have 613 mitzvahs, but he certainly has different mitzvahs, is the Raya Mehemne. And in certain parshas, all you have of Raya Mehemne is mitzvahs. Pekuda Kadma, Pekuda Tinyana, Pekuda Tlisa. Raya Mehemne has other things as well. Like Raya Mehemne, Parshas Mishpatim, maybe Lubavitcher knows, it's the source of the Taich of Beinani in Tanya. But the Raya Mehemne, to a great degree, is Sefer HaMitzvahs. And then, of course, you have Idra Rabba, which is in Parshas Nosei, Idra Zuta, which is in Parshas V'Hazinu, which is the deep Seidus. Hashem Bayachai gathered together 10 Talmidim. They started learning Kabbalah, and 3 of them passed away. Plus the Sabish and Mesu Idra. He taught Seidus HaTeirah. And then, of course, the Idra Zuta was that Hashem Bayachai calls together his Talmidim again, and he says to them, Hetzachayim, last time we got together, we learned Seidus, and 3 of our Chevre passed away. I want to get together one more time, and this time, I want to pass away. So they were nice enough to oblige him. They came together, the 7 Talmidim. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai said, say this, and Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was installed. And of course, before he passed, this is in Hazinu. Before he passed away, he told Rabba to write the Zayar down and to hide it. Sure. Idra Rabba was 10. Idra Zuta was 7. Idra Rabba is in Parshas Nosei. Now, there's another section in Zayar which is called Tikkunei Zayar. Tikkunei Zayar, or Tikkunim, by the way, there's something also called Tikkunei Zayar Chodesh, just like the Zayar Chodesh is Tikkunei Zayar Chodesh. And Tikkunei Zayar is a Pirush Ambratius. The Rebbe once said in Fabrengen that there are Sforim written, a whole Sefer written on one pasuk. And the example that Rebbe brought was the Sefer Tikkunei Zayar. The whole Sefer Tikkunei Zayar, it's, I don't know what, a 71 or 72 Tikkunim, all explaining the pasuk. Bereshis Baruch L'kimas Hashmayim V'Sa'aretz. It's Tikkunim is, Pasuk Eliyahu that we say on Friday is from the Akdam of the Tikkunei Zayar. So the Behuda Dilion copied the Zayar and disseminated the Zayar, Mefasim the Zayar, and the Jewish world blew up. It was on fire. Yidden don't take to new things easy. In other words, the way Jews work is, anytime somebody comes along with a new idea, the first thing you do is you scream, Chodesh Asam Anateda, Treif. And the person who produced it has to be condemned or questioned or examined. And it takes a long time for a new idea in Yiddishkeit to be accepted and integrated and become a part of the mainstream. So the Zayar comes along and people start learning it, and people are saying this is the story that they knew about. Yidden had a Maseidah Baal Peh. Yidden knew for hundreds and hundreds of years that Torah had a Madrega of Seid. In Shas you have Masechet Chagiga, the Mishnah and the Gemara, you have Kabbalah, and of course in the Tanakh you have the Ma'aseh Merkava. Yidden knew that there's something called Seidus HaTorah. It was lost. And you should know, a lot of people used to say that philosophy, Chochmas Aristei, is this Seid, Achmon al-Itzlan. Arizal was a Goy. And this Torah is a Goyish HaChochma. It's not Torah, it's Hashem. It's a Chochma Tivis. It has nothing to do with the Eibishter. People believe that this must be the mysticism, the secrets of the Torah, because the Rebbe was the highest in it. And the rediscovery of the Zohar opened people's eyes. Forget philosophy, mysticism. In this Sefer, Hagdola Shem Ramunim, he brings a Gavaldik Azach from a Sefer called Nachlas Shiva, that Abarbanel writes that is a letter from Avram ben Arambam, the son of Ben Rambam. Avram ben Arambam says, my father was an old man, and an old man came to him with Megillas, with scrolls. And my father sat with this old man, and they were misamek. They delved deeply into these soides of this scrolls, and then this old man left. And my father said, if I was young and I had the koyach, I would travel all over the world. I would collect every single copy of my moire, the Meir Nevuchim, and I would burn it. And it's understood, or it says befeidish, this was the Zayed. Sof Yom of the Rambam Gelen Kabbala. For those who do not know, it says in Kisvi Arizal that the Rambam had no shaykhis to Kabbala. That mitzad his name, the Chav Reis had no shaykhis to Kabbala. The Frierdiker Rebbe brings in the Sikhe that it's a Kabbalah from Rebbe to Rebbe from the Baal Shem Tov. That the Rambam was a groise mekubal, a big mekubal. And the Raya is because it says in the beginning of Sefer Hayad, Yeseida Yeseida Zamud HaChochma Tashtevis Havai. So the Rebbe has a ha'ara. In Sefer Sikh is Tafshin ha'ara. How could the Frierdiker Rebbe say that we have Kabbalah Rebbe and Rebbe mekubal when it says in Achav the Rambam didn't learn Kabbalah? So the Rebbe doesn't really answer the question. Leaves it not tzarich. He's mitzayin to kamas for him, including Rishonim. He brings on the Migdalois Medachzach or Agos Maimonides, who says that Rambam was a mekubal. It's a controversy, but the truth, which is almost universally accepted, is that for sure in Seif Yom of Lama that Rambam Kabbalah. At least at the end of his life, the Rambam learned Kabbalah. I don't know if you guys know this, but there was a Gaon who lived in our generation. He was Rav Reuven Margolis. Rav Reuven Margolis has an entire sefer, a whole sefer. It's not a big sefer, but it's a sefer. That's called HaRambam V'Azeya, where he shows scores of Rambams, many Rambams, many. That the only source for the Rambam is Azeya. In other words, Rambam is pasking Nigla the Teire, yeah, but a lot of his piskei din you can't find in Shas, you can't find in Poskim. The Rambam Pasha took it from Zeya. The Shaila is that Rambam had the Zeya already, Pasha copied it from there. Or the Rambam Pasha knew it, Baruch HaKedesh, it was Machav and Lamitas Shal Teire. When the Rebbe made the Takon of Rambam, one of the things the Rebbe did was that we should make a RaMAK on Rambam. And the Rebbe himself sent in a few RaMAK as an introduction, as a hishtafus in the effort. And the RaMAK the Rebbe sent in is that when it says in the Rambam, Yeseida, the Limud HaChochmas, Leida, Sheyesham Matzirishin, that the first mitzvah is to know the Eibishter, the source of that Rambam is in Zeir, not in Nigla. That the mitzvah of Yediyas Hashem, the source of it is in Rambam, in the middle of his life. He wrote the Yad HaChazaka before he learned Kabbalah. If he only learned Kabbalah and Seif Yomav, yes. There's Sfarim of Kabbalah from him. So first let me give you a philosophical question. Jewish people used to have an anthropomorphic concept of God. They imagined the Eibishter as having hands and feet and a body based on Pshutei Amakrois, like the Ravid writes. It says the Eibishter has hands, he must have hands. Philosophy came along and was Moitzi Dvarim Pashtusan, made everything very simple. Chas v'shalom Hashem has hands, Chas v'shalom Hashem has feet, Chas v'shalom Hashem has eyes, Chas v'shalom Hashem has mikrei aguf. You can't even say he has body-like functions. Ayat says yad, Ayat says ragel, Ayat says ayin, dibra teirek, loshem and the other, it's all allegory, it's all metaphor and so on. Comes again Zohar, Amaisa met 10 spheres. The Zohar complicates this. It makes it all very complicated. Because in Zohar you do speak about the concept of a yad. Chesed droyo yamina, the right hand lady is chesed. Gevura droyo smala. And a lot of people were very confused by all of this. Because Zohar is Torah. Chakira is not Torah. And it almost seemed like in Chakira you had a more pshitas dekelakus than you had in Kabbalah. And of course it created all kinds of controversies. I'll touch on a few points over the course of this conversation. I can't touch on everything, but I'll touch on a few of these points as we proceed. Here's what happened. The Yehuda Diliyom was Mefasam the Zayat, and immediately the Jews were divided into 3 shitas. Shita number 1. That the Zayat is Baba Maisis. Hocus pocus, superstition, nonsense, throw it in the garbage. Yehuda Diliyom invented it because of his own interests, and has no basis, has no credibility, it's false garbage. A second shita said, the Sefer HaZayat is Emes, and Kabbalah is Emes. But it's the Buddha de Leon's own Kabbalah. It's his own Torah. He wrote it in Arabic, in Aramaic. He incorporated the names of the Tanoim and the Amiroyim and so forth to add credibility to himself, to make it more believable. But in reality, it's his own Sefer, and he wrote it himself. Agav, parenthetically, the so-called scholars who don't believe in anything, who read this material as if they're experts, don't deny that Rabbi Yehuda de Leon has his own Sfarim. Rabbi Yehuda de Leon has Sefer Azayah. If Rabbi Yehuda de Leon wrote the Sefer Azayah by himself, he was a very, very, very good actor. Because his own Kabbala and the Kabbala that he writes in Sefer Azayah are not the same Kabbala. In other words, if a person is bluffing, if a person is trying to make something that he wrote attribute to somebody else, usually you should be able to compare it to his own writings. But in this case, nobody denies, even the biggest apokorsim, the biggest cynics do not deny that when you read the Yehuda de Leon's own Sfarim, which are published, and you read the Zayar, it's a different. The language of the Zayar is consistent with the mystical forms that existed in the times of the Tanoim. This was the second day. And the third day, of course, was that not only is the Zayar emes, but the Zayar is traceable to RaShBi. It goes back to the Tanoim. This is the Seidas that Yidden talked about and knew about that had been lost and had been rediscovered b'Soif Yemaya at the end of time, and it's credible. So people started learning the Zayar, people started copying the Zayar, and naturally there was a huge milchama. Sufficient Yidden. I mean, Jews don't take to new things easy, and forget that's why we exist, that's why we survive. It took a very, very long time for the Zayar to be universally accepted, and moreover universally accepted as a Sefer Taka written not by Rabbi Yehuda de Leon, but a Sefer written by Rab Shimon Bar Yochai. Today there's not a Fruma Yid on the planet who does not believe that the Sefer Azeh comes from RaShBi. Just for the purposes of full disclosure, the Yavitz, Bank of Emden, it was only 300 years ago, held that the Zayar was amended. In other words, that some ideas in the Zayar were added later. And he, so to speak, he cuts and pastes. He says what in Yodam and Zayar, if gehalten, what in Yodam and Zayar, not if gehalten. For example, the quote that the Rebbe brings in Likutei Sichos, Man pnei ha'odan avaya do RaShBi. The Likutei Sichos. Pnei ha'odan avaya means Rab Shimon Bar Yochai. So he writes that this is a Pekursus, the Yavitz, the Bank of Emden, and he says it was added later. But he's the only Fruma Yid who takes that position. Beklalos, over the last hundreds of years, it's been accepted by all Jews. And you're talking about Gedolim, the Arizal, the RaMak, the Vilna Gaon, Alter Rebbe, the Gedolei Chassidim, the Gedolei Misnagdim, the Gedolei Chassidim, the Gedolei Ashkenaz, the Gedolei Sfardim. Kula alma lei pliga that Zayar is emes, and that Zayar is from RaShBi. But the story doesn't finish there. There's a lot more detail. A lot more detail. One of the controversies that arose when the Zayar was learned, copied, and disseminated was minhag. Now we use the word minhag as customs, right? In the olden days, minhag didn't mean a custom. Minhag meant ritual, how you do mitzvahs. There's a full status. There's many, many, many conflicts between the Shas and the Zayar. Where for hundreds and hundreds of years, Yidden did something a certain way based on the Gemara, based on the Paskim. Along comes the Sefer Azayah, and Sefer Azayah says he's supposed to do it different. There's many, many examples for this. In every area of Yiddishkeit. Obviously, little details, but nevertheless. So what do you do when you have a conflict between Halacha and Kabbala? What do you do when you have a conflict between Zayar and Shas? The Shas tells you the minig is one way, the Kabbala tells you the minig is another way. Well, what happened b'meshech hazman was that b'klolus, it became a division between Sfardim and Ashkenazim. The Sfardim adopted the policy that says halacha v'Kabbalah, halacha k'Kabbalah. When there's a conflict between halacha and Kabbalah in minhag, we're talking about ritual. What you do b'peil, you do like Kabbalah. The Ashkenazim, probably the most famous name in this shita is Barshal. He was a staunch Ashkenazi. Held that when you have machlokes between the Shas and the Kabbalah, halacha v'Kabbalah, halacha k'halacha. So Sfardim and Ashkenazim became split in this way, that Sfardim Poshet adopted, they changed the Siddur, they changed the Minhagim, they changed Kama v'Kama and Yonam and Yiddishkeit, in all aspects of Yiddishkeit, based on the newly discovered Zayar and the Mashmoas, the implications from the Sefer HaZayar. While amongst Ashkenazim, the policy was still learn Zayar, understand Zayar, meditate on Zayar, but do like it says in the Shas. And this, by the way, explains the huge machlekes when the Baal Shem Tov came along. The Misnagdim and the Hasidim, what was at the heart of that machlekes? At the heart of that machlekes was that we are Ashkenazim. Hasidim are Ashkenazim. And although Hasidim are Ashkenazim, we adopted the Shita of the Sfardim, that Halacha v'Kabbala, Halacha Kabbala. And this made the Misnagdim crazy, for logical reasons. Just like Sfardim are proud Jews, Ashkenazim are proud Jews. Kumens again Ashkenazim, a whole kibbutz, a whole community of Ashkenazim, and so to speak, flipping over to the Sfardi side and saying that when you have a conflict of Halacha and Kabbala, do like Kabbala, Heipach, the tradition of the Ashkenazim, that you shouldn't adopt minhagim of Kabbala. And this is really what lies at the heart, at least to a great extent, the machlekes between Hasidim and Misnagdim. But this is how things develop, slowly. Now, eventually the Zohar was printed. You have to read the Hagdomas HaZohar. The person with Meitul Ed Zohar has a Hagdom. It's very interesting how he writes about the responsibility. I think the first printing of the Zohar was in the year Shin Chaf, which is over 400 years ago, 450 years ago now. He tells the achrayis of what it means to print a Sefer Zohar, but he has to print it, and so forth and so on. Rabbi Yitzchak Diloch, I think is his name, the person who printed the Zohar, he wrote a Haskama. Now, all of this was resolved to a great extent through the onset of a few very, very, very famous Mekubalim. There are certain Mekubalim who, as they say, removed all doubts, solved all of these issues, I guess you could say once and for all. And the Frierdiker Rebbe talks about such personalities. He lists 3 men. He says these 3 people were so holy and so great that their confirming the emes of Kabbalah and the emes of Zohar has forever settled the question of the legitimacy of Chochmas HaKabbalah. And they are, in chronological order, Rav Meir ben Gabbai, Rav Moshe Cordoviru, the RaMak, and Rav Yitzchak Lori Ashkenazi, that's the Arizal. Rav Meir ben Gabbai was from Girusha, Portugal. He was kicked out of Portugal. And he wrote several Sfarim. One of the Sfarim that he wrote that Rebbe actually printed after the Parsha of the Sfarim. And one of the Sfarim that he printed is a Sefer that's called Avodas HaKodesh, which is so quoted in Chassidus quite often. Avodas HaKodesh is a Sefer HaYesod in Kabbalah. It's really a fundamental, it's not an easy Sefer, but it's a beginner. The most fundamental ideas, the Shitas of Kabbalah, come across very, very clearly in Sefer Avodas HaKodesh. It's a Mesudadik Sefer. It's not about Sfiris and Eilamis, it's so much. It's about Atzil, it's about godliness, it's about Gili Alakus, it's a good Sefer. Avodas HaKodesh. Then comes the Pardes. The Pardes wrote a Sefer, also very encyclopedic, very, very organized, where he's putting forth Chochmas HaKabbalah, I suppose you could say it in the framework of Hishtalshalus. The Avodas HaKodesh, the Meir ben Gabbai. He was a Sfardi. And he puts forth, the RaMak, the Moshe Cordoviru, puts forth Kabbalah in a Seder of Lamed Beit Shiarim. He goes through Seder Hishtalshalus and so forth and so on. What the RaMak does, very interesting, is every single thing he touches, every topic he addresses, the first thing he does is he quotes all the Zayars and all the Sefer HaBoyas that are necessary. He quotes all the sources first. And then he expounds. That's his derech. He quotes a ganze shtickle Zayar, a ganze shtickle Sefer HaBoy, and he quotes sometimes the beginning of a shad of Pardes could be several pages of just quotes of Zayar. And after he brings you all the sources, then he tells you how he understands it. Very organized, very mesuda. The RaMak you could actually learn. It's not easy, but it's possible to learn. Then, of course, came the Arizal. The Arizal is a story unto itself. But the Arizal brought Kabbalah to the next level. The RaMak, of course, lived in Tzfas. Rav Moshe Cordoviru lived in Tzfas. And he was the head of the Yeshivas HaMekubalim in Tzfas. Tzfas at that time was the greatest city in the world in terms of Torah. At Kedei Kach, the Beis Yosef lived there, Kiyadu Meforsim. They were thinking about bringing back the Smicha and reintroducing Kiddush HaChedesh Al Piyah and bringing back the Niknosis. They wanted to bring back what used to be, in the Zman HaBayis. They should bring back the Smicha if they had enough of the Gedolei Yisrael their time gathered in one place, and so forth and so on. It didn't work out because of the Ralbach, Reb Levi ben Chaviv. He lived in Yerushalayim, and he felt that it's not enough. Kimitzi and Teitzei Seder is not enough. There has to be a Dvar Havayim Yerushalayim. It's a ganze Shturim. There's Svarim written on this. But it was a very, very special time, Tzfas, then. And the Arizal walked into Tzfas during the lifetime of the RaMak. Neither of these men had Arichas Yamim. The RaMak lived into his late 30s, the Arizal lived into his middle or early 30s. They both passed away very young. The RaMak was an incredibly prolific writer. The RaMak wrote Bashbos HaKolmas. He wrote superhumanly fast. The RaMak has a Pirush on Zohar, which is like a Shas. It's called Er Yakar. It was only printed in the last 50 years. It's 30 volumes. He has a trickle, a Zohar in the center, and just a commentary on Zohar, which is so expansive, so voluminous. It's mamish, it's like a Shas. It's incredibly large. And I understand there's a sefer called Er HaChama, which Chassidus quotes. The Er Yakar is not quoted in Chassidus because the Pasha didn't exist. It was in Ksav Yad. It was in the library of the Ramemi Panu. I think the Rebbe has, by the way, in the Rebbe's library, there are certain parts of the Er Yakar in Ksav Yad Koche of the RaMak. Ksav Yad Koche of the RaMak. But Er HaChama is 3 volumes of Bir on Zohar, which was a kitzer, a tamtzis, the Sefer HaYakar, the Er HaChama gemacht of Avram Azuloi, the Zayd of the Chidah. Now, what's the story of Arizal? Arizal was born in Yerushalayim. And his father passed away when he was very, very young. So he moved to Mitzrayim because his mother had a brother there. And he lived in Egypt. I think Alexandria, but I could be wrong. And he married his first cousin. He married his uncle's daughter. He married his mother's brother's daughter. He lived in Mitzrayim for most of his life. And during the Tkuf, they lived in Mitzrayim, for 7 years he was a potter. 7 years he was isolated, completely removed from the world. During those 7 years, Eliyahu HaNavi taught him Kabbala. During the period of that Arizal was living in Mitzrayim, he wrote a sefer. Arizal wrote only one sefer. It's a Pirush, a sefer that's in Yusuf, Ksav Yad Arizal, it's printed. It's printed. Arizal wrote that sefer himself. At a certain point, Eliyahu HaNavi told Arizal, it's time for you to move to Eretz Yisrael, move to Tzfas. So the Arizal showed up in Tzfas, the RaMak was still alive. And he joined the Heichel of the RaMak. And people did not realize how great Arizal was. Reb Chaim Vital said, he himself did not realize how great Arizal was. The Rebbe said once in the Fabrengen, that Oib de Pardes is Seydis HaTeira, is the Arizal Seydis HaPardes. If the Pardes is the secrets of the Teira, the Arizal is the secrets of the Pardes. In other words, the Kabbalah of the Arizal is much, much more difficult than the Kabbalah of the Pardes. Kisvi Arizal is, you can't read, it's like reading mathematical code. The Pardes you can read and understand a little. In the Arizal, it's mamish, very, very concentrated. It's much, much more difficult. And it took people a long time to realize who the Arizal was. And when the Pardes passed away, the Arizal became the head of the kibbutz of the Mekubalim in Tzfas. Reb Chaim Vital was his favorite Talmud. Arizal actually said that only Reb Chaim Vital was allowed to write. None of the other Talmidim were allowed to write. But they wrote anyway. And when the Sefer Eitz Chaim was prepared, I think, by the Yankov Tzemach, or the Meir Paprish, one of the Talmidim of Talmidei Arizal. He has Min HaChavedim. The Sefer Eitz Chaim is mostly Kabbalah Sarachav, but you have Min HaChavedim from the other Talmidim. And the purists, there's a big controversy in the Kabbalah world, whether you're allowed to read those Sfarim of the Arizal that were written not by Reb Chaim Vital. The Reb Chaim says that he could not understand the Torah of his Rebbe. It was too much for him. And his Rebbe took him once on Motzei Shabbos on the Kinneret, Yam Kinneret, where Miriam Be'er is, and he took a cup of water, and he filled it up and he gave it to his Talmud to drink, and Reb Chaim Vital drank it. He says, and afterwards he was able to learn Kabbalah from the Ari. And he wrote down Kisvei Arizal. The Arizal said he couldn't write. And the Arizal said the reason he cannot write, he can't, his brain is working so fast, he can't concentrate his thoughts. You know, there's a famous story that Chassidus brings, that Arizal lay down once for 2 hours on a Shabbos afternoon, Pashas Bolok. And when he got up, his brother-in-law asked him what he was saying. He's so muttering with his lips. He says, for me to say what I saw in the last 2 hours would take me, there's 2 girses. One gear says it'll take me 60 years to say, and another gear says it'll take me 80 years to say. I mean, you want to understand what's made the Hasagas from the Arizal. So the Arizal said he couldn't write his thoughts down. He could only speak. And even then, it says that he would sweat, he would perspire from the great symptom to be able to teach his Talmidim. And Achav wrote down the Chochmah, the Kabbalah Sadari. Like I told you before, the other Chavedim wrote as well. Now, the interesting thing about Kisvei Arizal is Mahaduris. The Arizal's writings were written many times. I mean, the experts will tell you that there may be as many as 5 Mahaduras, 5 drafts of Kisvei HaArizal. Then Chaim Vital wrote once, and then he wrote again, and he wrote again, and he wrote again. The final draft of the Kisvei HaArizal, in other words, what's considered in the world the most authentic draft of Kisvei HaArizal, is called Shmoina Shiyarim. If you have the set of Arizal, you see right away the different drafts, some of them at least. The Shmoina Shiyarim were written by Reb Shmuel Vital, by the son of the Rachav, and the story was that the Shmoina Shiyarim were buried. They were buried. And many, many years later, it was determined that Pashat the Welt needs it, and they asked Mechila, and they exhumed it, took it out of his cave, out of the cave of Chaim Vital, of Shmuel Vital, and we have the Shmoina Shiyarim. But the reality was that for hundreds of years, the Shmoina Shiyarim was in manuscript. In the times of the Alter Rebbe, the Shmoina Shiyarim were not yet printed. Maybe 1 or 2 of the Shmoina Shiyarim were printed. So the Kabbala, which was angenommen by us from the Arizal, is the Eitz Chaim and the Pri Eitz Chaim, in which you have not just Rachav. The Shmoina Shiyarim are strict Rachav, only the Chaim Vital. In the Eitz Chaim and the Pri Eitz Chaim, you also have Menachavedim. There's a huge controversy that exists till this day. You have the purists, in Yerushalayim, the yeshivas of Kabbala, Shara Shamayim, the Yetzim the Talmidim of the Rashash, of Shalom Sharabi, who are strict Shmoina Shiyarim. They get very angry at Lubavitch. Lubavitch considers themselves Arizal, and they bring men Hachavedim. There's letters from the Rebbe, which are printed in Nigis Kedish, which were written to Rabbi Greenglass. I just printed a sefer Rabbi Greenglass. I just bought it yesterday. For Rabbi Shazalik Margolis. Rabbi Shazalik Margolis was a big Mekubal, but he was a big Kanoi, he was a big fanatic, zealot. B'meila, the Rebbe was treif to him. The Rebbe was not pious enough, so he would not correspond with the Rebbe directly, but he would correspond with Greenglass. Greenglass was a Mekubal, and Greenglass was a relative of his. And there was an exchange of letters where he has tainus to Chassidus Chabad. He wrote many Sfarim, but Shazalik Margolis wrote a lot of Sfarim in Kabbala. And the Rebbe is complaining, how come he doesn't bring Chassidus Chabad? And I think he started bringing in his latest Sfarim Chassidus Chabad. In fact, I think he even made a shir to learn Chassidus Chabad. And the arguments revolve in part around this question of which Kabbalah is Ois gehalten. And the Rebbe writes in those letters that the Baal Shem Tov gave over a Maseda, which our Rebbeim had, the Rebbe Mipi Rebbe, which in Yonam Kabbalah we follow, which Shitas. It's not a kasha, how come in Chassidus you'll bring certain in Yonam. Most Ruba de Ruba Chassidus follows the Kabbalah of the Rachav, Chaim Vital. But there are cases, some of them are quite famous, where we follow the other Shitas, Menachavedim, because the Baal Shem Tov had his own Shita. It wasn't the Pshat the Baal Shem Tov was following somebody else. The Baal Shem Tov had his own Shita. And in Shitas Baal Shem Tov, these in Yonim you have to follow from the other Chavedim, and these in Yonim you follow Shitas Rachav. There's a famous story that the Baal Shem Tov once said about Torah. There's 2 famous Torahs Baal Shem Tov. One is on Tkiyas Shefer, and the other one is on Mikveh. I don't know which one it was. It was either Tkiyas or Mikveh. But be that as it may, he gave Kavanas different than Arizal. He said a Torah, and it either was Kavanas HaMikveh or Kavanas HaTkiyas, which are printed, different than the Ari. So the Chavraya Kadisha was sitting by the table, and they were a bit surprised that the Baal Shem Tov would say Kavanas Hepech HaArizal. As they were sitting by the table, Rav Nachman Mehordanka, who was the junior, the youngest of the Talmidim, fell asleep. Bamtish. And he sees Neshamas running, and he runs with Neshamas. He comes into a big, big hall, and he sees the Baal Shem Tov saying the same Torah that they had just heard him say Bamtish in Yelam Hazeh. And the Baal Shem Tov says this Torah, and as the Baal Shem Tov is saying the Torah, a young man gets up and argues with him. And they argued for a Meshach Zman, and then the young man finally said to the Baal Shem Tov, "You're right." And then Rav Nachman Mehordanka wakes up, and the Baal Shem Tov turns to him and says to him, "Nu, wer ist gerecht?" In other words, he showed him the vikuach between the Baal Shem Tov and the Arizal on the other side. The Baal Shem Tov knew he said different than the Arizal. So he showed him how the Arizal acquiesced, how the Arizal was masking, it's a bewusste Meise, that the Arizal was masking that the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov is emes. So our Kabbalah, the having Chassidus, is like I said before, it's Igros Kedi, let us know about this, is not strict. Rachav, you have also what's called Menachavedim. Now, I have to stop. But I want to just leave you with a thought, which I will develop mitzvah next time. And that is this. The Arizal introduced another very, very significant part of Kabbalah, but one of extraordinary controversy. And that is what we call Kabbala Mises. The idea of using Kabbala for miracles, writing Kameis, Shemis, names of Malachim, all kinds of mystical things that are used to heal people. The whole Kabbalah of today is reading palms and reading mezuzahs and so forth and so on. It's called Kabbala Mises. And one of the things that separated the RaMak from the Arizal was this. The RaMak believed only in Kabbalah Yunus. He didn't believe in Kabbala Mises. Kabbalah you learn outside Limud. Kabbalah you learn outside Hizbonenus, outside meditation. But you do not use Kabbalah to perform miracles until the Fikva the Bezeh. The Arizal was a great practitioner of Kabbala Mises, and this evolved into Hasidus, at least to a degree. We'll talk about it through the Baal Shem. That's what the word Baal Shem means. Baal Shem means a practitioner of Kabbala Mises, and this we're going to leave for next time.